Hi, this is Nikhil and Shelly coming to you from Chicago with the Shelly Story. We wrote a book and are currently working on a movie about our journeys with mental health, specifically bipolar disorder. As an offshoot of that, we've developed a podcast called The Shelly Story, where we speak to people from a broad variety of backgrounds about diverse issues, most notably mental health. We're very excited to speak to today's guest, Mytrae Meliana. We had met her through a mutual connection, Tanushri Sengupta, host of the Desi Condition, on which we had both appeared. Her story just blew me away. I mean, I saw so many common threads in what she's gone through and what Shelly and I have been through in our journey that we absolutely just had to have her on the show. So we're very excited that she was willing to share some of her time. I'll tell you a little bit about her background. Mytrae Meliana is a holistic psychotherapist, trauma specialist, women's empowerment, and divine feminine teacher, channel, award winning author, musician, sound healer, and speaker. Her mission is to help women heal from trauma, liberate themselves from patriarchy, and evolve to their divine selves. She has empowered hundreds of women individually and in workshops and programs to find their voice, truth, soul purpose, and connect with the divine feminine. She is the author of two books, one on spiritual healing, and the other is her memoir of overcoming trauma. It's called Brown Skin Girl, an Indian American woman's magical journey from broken to beautiful. And she lives in the Portland area. So, Mytrae, it's so great to have you again. If you can maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story, maybe beyond what I had shared here.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be here with both of you. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
I mean, essentially, I grew up in India, and my family moved to the U.S. when I was 16, and embarked on, just the delicious freedom and opportunities of education that are available here.
Hmm.
At 22, very briefly, I fell in love with an American man, and when my family found out, they took me back to India, saying if I went back for 3 months and I still wanted to be with him, they would allow that. But once I was there, they essentially took everything from me, my passport, wallet, green card, everything, and put me under house arrest for a year.
Wow.
Um, and it was a really dark time. They also took me to a Swami who, there's just a lot of brainwashing and shaming of being sexual, of being a woman, of just following my own freedoms and choosing my body and my life, essentially. So I was severely traumatized after that, and was numb. Dissociation is one of the outcomes of especially long-term trauma, and I was disconnected from myself. I couldn't feel. So once, even though I was able to escape after 3 years, but even though I was quote unquote physically free, I was still emotionally entrapped. And I didn't know how to return to the 22-year-old I was. And therapy at the time, I was unfamiliar with. It wasn't part of the Indian culture, so I didn't really know what it was about. And it would be many years later, when I was 39, that I actually decided to leave an emotionally abusive marriage with an Indian man, and just strike out, leave the family, leave the marriage, leave the culture, because I felt like the culture had just really not done right by me as a woman, and not given me the right support. It was so completely unfair and abusive, that I just broke from it all and decided to go to graduate school to become a therapist. I had never been in therapy at the time. I had just gone to this free 6 week group at the
Hmm.
YWCA for women who had been sexually abused, and met with a counselor for about a month. And that was such an eye-opening experience, because it was then that I realized that I wasn't bad, but that I'd been abused. And it was a huge eye-opener. And from then on, it's just been this beautiful climb and journey of healing and empowerment, becoming a therapist, and then, my work and just healing, a lot of personal healing and growth from there. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the cultural implications or the cultural aspect of your journey, because I think it's so important. And as we were talking before, that really plays into the story that Shelly and I put together, which is how much did culture impact our identity and our goals and what we really wanted out of life and what we thought of as the best versions of ourselves. Because
Mm-hmm.
I would tell you that what we think about it right now is extremely different from what it was when we got married 21 years ago. So we talk on our podcast, we've talked a lot about the double-edged sword of Indian culture, because obviously as a group I think South Asians have done very well in this country. And when you look at the top executives at the top companies, most of them are a lot of them are Indian. But then there's also, as we know, there's pressure, there's this impossible standard, there's this the dark side of the collectivist culture, which is it's great to have this community. It's great to have friends. It's great to have family who all sort of are on the same in the same community, the same team. But at the same time, that leads to impossible ideals to live up to. It leads to this need to suppress everything and just put on a happy face and just really live this false life, this avatar that's really not in line with reality. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about the cultural aspect and how that played into your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you said. India is a traditional patriarchy,
Hmm.
and so we are living, or we're sort of steeped in centuries and centuries and generations of patriarchal thinking. And I know you're speaking as a man, but I think for women it is hugely detrimental and hugely harmful, because there's this sort of code. It's not just a social code, but there's also a religious code that's on top of that, which says a woman is supposed to be obedient. A woman belongs to a family, and then to her husband. So a woman really essentially never belongs to herself. Duty, the concept of duty, and self-sacrifice. And these are the stories we sort of get, as children, from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, like just the women sort of dutifully bowing their heads and following along,
Subservient.
the
Yeah.
subservience,
Yep.
never really choosing themselves. And on the other hand, we have these amazing images of, the powerful goddesses like Kali and Durga, and queens who are warriors. But there's that just such a gap. And so there isn't that bridge between how does a woman choose herself. I
Mhm.
grew up not knowing I could choose myself. I just, even though I was given a lot of education by my family, it was always so marriage was the end goal. And then once I was numb, I couldn't quite think outside of that. The trauma made me believe that I couldn't have what Western women had. Like I literally was not allowed to have the opportunities to become a woman in the fullest sense, whether it's in my body, as my voice, my power, my sexuality, and career as well. I just felt, the trauma was a huge sort of dampener on everything, on top of the cultural codes. Um, and the tremendous pressure from the family, like you say, to
Mhm.
look a certain way,
Yeah.
to be this person who's a doctor, engineer, lawyer. I mean, it's so formulaic, like who you can be to be accepted by your family and approved
Right.
of. And now, as children, we grow up like our love for us depends on the approval and belonging to our family. And so it's a very deep conditioning that we naturally want to fit in, we want to belong. And it's really hard to sort of leave, to break from the group, to break
Yep.
from the culture, because then where is that other group that you join? Because on top of that, there's also looking at other cultures as the other,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, the West can often be considered a dangerous culture because they're going to contaminate you with thoughts and ideas potentially that are harmful to the Indian culture, to the Indian group.
Right.
So if you don't have a community that is, or friends who are also sort of on the outskirts, sort of questioning, it's sort of a solo journey, and that was mine. I didn't have many people I was journeying with.
Yeah.
Um,
And the India and Western culture is such an interesting dynamic because with India, I mean, obviously, India became a free country in the 40s, and none of us grew up under colonial rule. But it's interesting to think that a lot of that trauma from our ancestors is almost handed down, and I think that plays
yeah,
into a lot of it. It's just that we hear the stories or we read the books, and it's almost like we feel that sense of other, that sense of oppression in our DNA, and that
right,
can really shape. And I think, and I'm sure you'll talk about this a little bit, is that probably plays a lot into the cultural distrust of psychotherapy, is that
right,
it's a Western concept, and you've talked
right.
about this elsewhere, is that it's this not for us. Basically, it's this Westerner thing. It's for the elite. It's for people who can afford 4 sessions a week of sitting on someone's couch, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And everybody also in Indian society, we look to our family for that support system. We look to them as our own therapists within our family, and we don't look outside that realm thinking that maybe an unbiased perspective and third party can be really beneficial. So I think there's a huge block there. We're from a family of 4 physicians, so highly educated family, but yet not even right now, but years ago, there was such a block and stigma with psychology and psychiatry and, tremendous amount of labeling that occurred. And it wasn't even something that was said outright necessarily. It was just kind of embedded. Like you guys made a reference to our ancestors and how that came across oceans, all those kinds of beliefs to Western society growing up in this country.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the other piece is that there is another angle of a
Hmm.
spiritual superiority where we were supposedly an ancient culture, so we know it all. But when I was living in India as an adult for 7 years and going through my life, I realized that there was really an emotional block, or like a
Hmm.
blind spot about the emotions. Indians are brilliant intellectually and very spiritually, but in the emotional realm, that's where psychotherapy is so beautiful and powerful. And if we could bring everything together, then it's the best of both worlds. It's an East meets West. And
Yeah.
I think that that's where we're all heading. And we just need to set aside these othering and like, what can we learn from each other and bring it home to ourselves? Because what's the point if a child commits suicide, out of what good is your family name or your status or,
Yeah. Or where you
and
went to college, if you
right,
went to an
what's
Ivy
really
League school.
exactly what's really important? Is your child's happiness important, or how you might look as a parent, and the people you are looking to sort of give you approval? It's a very misplaced thing, and I think as generations go by we will clear that.
And I think another component is a lot of people who are suffering, as well as their elders and loved ones, are operating from a place of fear, pure
Yeah,
fear.
yeah,
And so that really holds them back tremendously.
yeah, yeah. And therapy saved my life. I will just
Hmm.
it was extraordinarily helpful, because to be able to speak about things I hadn't spoken about, and to be heard and listen, and to be allowed to feel my emotions and not be, you know, the usual response of don't talk about it, or, where things are pushed under the rug. There's so much
Yeah.
denial, and we learn to repress our own feelings because it's not okay. But the permission to feel, I mean, it's real health. And even science has proved the relationship between emotions and physical health, that when we suppress our emotions, we don't process them, then they live in our body and they turn into physical illness. So
Yeah.
even from a
Absolutely.
scientific perspective, there's reason to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, this even comes towards human sexuality, female sexuality. So
Absolutely.
I remember, being raised, it wasn't a very healthy household, but at the same time, I was embarrassed by my body as a child, because your body's developing and you think people are going to look at I started to wear baggy clothes to try to hide myself. And that's not that's not good, because that confidence and respect for myself and self-love is really lacking. So I feel like there's such a stigma with sexuality, talking about it, being open about it, that even it's there to this day. It's almost along the lines the same as with mental illness.
Absolutely. It's a huge taboo, and that's a huge part of my work. It's been the key reason for my trauma, and I don't understand why it is, because sexuality is a life force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, none of us wouldn't be here if our
Right.
parents hadn't had sex.
Right. Right.
and so, if you just put a little thought behind it, what's wrong about it? And I
And what's
think
so
it's
interesting about it, also in Indian religion, I don't know if you've been to Aurangabad, and see the caves in Ajanta Ellora. It's literally like the
right.
Metropolitan Museum of Sexuality, literally. And it's,
Exactly.
I laugh about it because this is so funny because when we took a tour of the caves in Aurangabad back in '99, our tour guide was explaining to us that they don't teach sex ed in schools in India. They just bring them to the caves and show them the different positions. Which I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of a different spin on it. But at the same time, I mean, just with the culture, you would think that it's so embedded in the fabric of who we are that it should be more widely discussed. And I guess that kind of leads me into the next topic is, I mean, how has that dichotomy played out? Because in your life, because you were raised in India, you came here when you were 16, went back for was it 7 years? You said you were living in India,
Mhm.
and there's been an interplay, I guess, going there and here and back. But the way I look at it is, it's interesting because we are we're our culture and our history is very rich and deep in spirituality. If you read the Vedas, if you read the Upanishads, if you read, there's so many sadhus in the Himalayas that have so much inherent wisdom. And yet at the same time, here, when we come here, it's just about push. It's almost like we're pushing that aside. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's embarrassment necessarily, but it's like we have to conform to this new normal, which is very, stiff upper lip, very individualistic. Don't get too caught up in the fray. I mean, how has that played out in your life? And the reason I'm asking that is, it sounds like now you're embracing it a lot more, but is that the spirituality, is that more of a recent construct?
Spiritual. I think we're all spiritual. I
Mhm.
think it's just just are, whether it's joy or beauty or play or being in nature. We connect with that. That's just who
Mhm.
we are as human beings. And as a child, for me, Mother Earth was my spirituality. I just connected very deeply with trees and rocks and animals, and I felt just this resonance of the sacredness of all. It's just something I knew. It was just normal to me. And the music, when I studied music was my spirituality. It's like I
Yeah.
went into higher states. And then sexuality too. Sexuality was very spiritual for me. And that takes me back to Tantra, which is really this ancient Indian science and art, not just the Western Tantra, but Indian Tantra, where everything is sacred. And in that tradition, there is no dichotomy between the spiritual and the sexual. It is one. Everything,
Wow.
the universe is born of desire and of the union of the masculine and the feminine. And every moment, everything that exists is in this constant dance and lovemaking and of desire and ecstasy. I mean, that's just, if you get to the very core and the essence of being, that's who we are. And that is something that, something that I teach, but that's in India, but way, way back, which we've sort of pushed underground because it's taboo, because we're not
Yeah.
allowed to talk about it. Um, but coming back to your question, yeah, and then I did study Vedanta for several years. Um,
Mhm.
when I was taken back, I just that was the path that was introduced to me, and I thought that's all there was. And it took me many years to realize how much that path was divorced from the body
Mm.
and from the feminine and from sexuality, because it was very much about the head. It's a ascetic path. It's about transcending the body, leaving the earth. But there's another stream of in Hinduism, which is Tantra, which is the feminine, which is everything is sacred, that nothing
Mm.
is not sacred, and embrace it here now and be it here now, where there's no separation. Nothing is taboo, nothing is wrong, nothing is bad except our own judgments of it. So I think I've always been on a spiritual quest as a student, and just learning, and have been fascinated by different religions. And I think you're right. When I first came here, I was like, nobody's talking about religion. Like in India, it was like in every shop you go, there's a little diya or agarbatti or
Right.
flowers, and there's prayers, and just even in the speech, it's like, may God be with you, and it's just must have been your past life. It's just such a normal
Right.
conversation.
Embedded in the conversations.
Right. So it had to be put aside, and it was strange for me. But I think now I've sort of integrated it back and reclaimed it.
Yeah, and what's interesting now, and I always laugh about the concept of appropriation, right? Because this is stuff that we've been exposed to basically right out of the womb, about meditation, about sound, primordial sound meditation, about chanting the mantras and stuff. And now it's just become this fad, and it's just I think there was one example that just blew my mind, where I don't remember which company it was, but they actually had Ganesh sandals. They literally had sandals with a picture of Ganesh on the sand, which was like so wrong on so many levels. But I guess if I could back up a little bit, I wanted to understand, because on your website it talks about that you practice holistic psychotherapy. Can you take us a little bit through your journey as a psychotherapist? Because it sounds like initially your practice was more centered around conventional modes of psychotherapy, and it's evolved quite a bit since then. Or has it always been sort of the iteration that you're practicing currently? Like, take us through a little bit of your
Yeah.
journey with holistic psychotherapy and what that means. Holistic
Sure.
psychotherapy.
Sure. So I went to a school that was very mind, body, spirit, which is
Mm-hmm.
holistic.
Mm-hmm.
And that school was actually founded on Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. So it was this perfect meeting of East West, where the school was based on these principles of mind, body, spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called integral psychology, which is really everything. Again, it's like nothing is left out. There's nothing that's not sacred. There's nothing that's not human, and nothing
Mm-hmm.
that's not to be valued. So it was important to me to have a spiritual bent to the school I went with. So I didn't go to a traditional, Western psychotherapy school. So right from the start, I did that.
Sure.
And very soon after, it seemed like my work, I was taken both personally and professionally into new areas. Most of my clients didn't need medication. They were more high functioning, but they needed help with whether it's trauma or anxiety or depression or relationships and so on, family healing from family.
Mm-hmm.
So it was therapy in a deep sense of really, let's get inside you, and it wasn't CBT or surface therapy. It was more depth oriented therapy, where you really sort of understand what's an underlying cause for pattern or behavior, as well as self-exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that grew very quickly into incorporating some spiritual work like past life regressions and energy healing. And then my work evolved into groups. So leading groups for women's empowerment groups, helping women find their
Mm-hmm.
voice, find their power, their soul purpose, and so on. And because of my own journey, it's interesting how it's sort of been this dovetail with spirituality at the same
Sure.
time, where I started opening up to working with spirits, or rather they started working with me, I'll say that. And
Right.
it was there were presences in the room where clients would say, we feel this, or this is happening, and kind of things shifts would happen very quickly. And I don't even have words to say or an explanation to say what's happening. But what I know for certain is that there is so much available to us, so much help available to us from this higher world, in the realm of healing, in every realm, actually, that if we're open, they are able to come in and help us and work with us. So that developing that relationship started occurring. And so my work is now, then it opened up into sound. I was guided to start using sound with the bowls and voice. And that was an exponential shift, because once people's huge shifts started happening with sound, and things that would take people, 3 or 5 years, within 3 to 6 months, they would move through it. So it was, the work really accelerated and much more was possible. And that led me to realize, this one-on-one work is great, but what I really began to see with the power of sound is that it is so simple and so effective. And to me, it hit that spot of, I don't want healing to be only for the elite and the privileged. That with sound, I saw a way for everybody to receive healing for free, or at least, or at a very, very minimal rate. And I was, always I'm thinking India. I always have like, how would I help the people I've grown up with who didn't have, I've always held that. People who haven't had access to therapy or don't even know what therapy is.
Bringing it to the
Where do
masses,
women,
basically. Yeah.
and my work with, and so with sound, I found the answer that it is a very powerful modality, which I think transcends the whole cultural and religious barriers, which is very exciting. That it doesn't matter. You don't have to believe anything. There's no dogma, there's no teaching. You just experience it. And east, west, whatever, whomever you are, you feel it and you can receive the benefits. So that got me really, really excited about sound and vibrational healing in general.
Do you find that people are starting to be more open and they're evolving to these types of therapies, or are they really just stuck into the traditional side of things?
I think it's moving really fast. I feel like the world is just accelerating, especially with the pandemic. I think people have been confronted with, maybe I don't need to think this way, and maybe I can open up to something new. And with sound, there is no barrier. So I think it's a lot of people are embracing alternative healing, which sound is.
So, when I helped Nikhil and I helped save his life and everything, I had my own epiphany. And I realized it was the most beautiful feeling in the world to help another human being. Whether he was going to be my husband for the future or not, time would tell. But at that moment in time, I felt such gratitude and such joy in his well-being and his ability to come back from all this with my help, as well as with his own drive. And so I really told myself at that point, I want to go into healthcare and I want to help other people. I want to find a way. And it's amazing because when the timing is right, your people just come in your path. They come in your path and you don't even know it's coming and you're not even looking for it. And it just happens. And it sometimes happens so quickly and easily and seamlessly. And, I met the CEO of the company of Geostar, and we are very close. We're like family at this point in time. I met the chief scientific officer, and they're just the most wonderful people, humanitarians. And so then I started talking about launching the center in Chicago and start helping people through the use of their own stem cells with a lot of these degenerative conditions, for example, with like Lyme disease and things like that. And so I really we've evolved the center in really sort of understanding and starting to embrace even other holistic approaches to healing and other modalities when it comes to mental illnesses, like with, Nikhil's situation and bipolar disorder or depression. Also, when it comes to sort of a lot of these degenerative conditions, there's Ayurveda. And so that's starting to come about, and people are starting to really respect that. There's psychedelics with, mental illness and mental conditions. And so that is kind of my evolution. And I feel like sometimes, as you would know, when you endure such hardship and pain, and you're in that moment, you're going through everything, and you don't even, it's very hard to look beyond the pain at the moment. And you're always wondering, at least I was, why is this happening to me? I played my cards right. I did all these things. I tried to be a good person. Why? And you never realize it until later that answer appears.
It's such a powerful story. Such a powerful story.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love what you said about there's no better feeling than helping people. Yeah. I mean, you were born for this then. One of the things. So I got Lyme just out of the blue. I was sitting with a client and just had these horrific symptoms, just like a switch got turned on. And I didn't know what it was, what hit me. And I consulted with a Lyme specialist and just changed everything, my diet, and was doing these herbs and all kinds of, I was in the Bay Area, so everything I threw the kitchen sink at it, homeopathy. And I also, being a therapist, I also knew, I'm also coming from India, that I knew there was always a root cause to the physical illness, which is not physical. So I did my emotional work around it. And what I arrived at was that I wasn't in my power as a woman, that I had always sort of been a people pleaser, serving, whether it was my husband or the family, like I was sort of bowing to somebody other, but I wasn't in my power. And once I got that, it was like a light bulb went off for me. And it's like, when I heal that, or at least if I go in the direction of healing that, this will clear. I just knew it. It was crystal clear to me. And, but as part of that, I went to a center in Brazil, which I've shared with you about. It was a spiritual healing center and in Brazil, it's, there's a tradition called Spiritism, where it's very common that doctors work with mental health people, work with the mediums. In fact, they have the 3 buildings in the same compound where they all treat the same patient on different levels. And it's fascinating. But there, my symptoms went away the worst symptoms went away in 2 days. And after a year, my Lyme doctor said, don't come back and see me. It's because he said, you're done. Just take these herbs for a few, and my symptoms really, really went to reduce. So
and how long had you been living with Lyme disease at that point?
3 months with really intensive symptoms. It was like almost hard to function. It was really severe, debilitating. So it was radical for me. And also I received this emotional healing, and that opened my eyes to there is another way for all of us, beyond what we know of Western medicine, beyond what even I know of Indian medicine, of Ayurveda. It's like this thing with the spiritual realm was eye-opening. And and at that center, people were being cured of cancer. People who couldn't walk could walk again. People, all emotional issues, depression, alcohol, drug recovery, all different kinds of things were being cleared. And so I went back every couple of years, and of course I got tremendous healing, but I was also sort of being opened to the possibilities of spiritual healing. And that's where I'm at now. And since then, I have evolved to becoming a channel, which is, it's still a little hard for me to say that, but these are very real things. And I think indigenous cultures are not alien to indigenous cultures. It was really an extraordinary experience, and this is common in Brazil. Like it's a very known thing that you can go to a medium, and they work with beings have passed, who are helping beings coming to help or provide guidance. And, it's not always going to be like a wave of the wand, like it sort of was for me, but it means a lifestyle change. It means, addressing the emotional issues. It means your emotional work. So whether it's, really sort of taking ownership and responsibility for yourself, for your health, for your life, within relationships, is there, what needs to happen there? For me, I had to sort of forgive,
Yeah.
what my experience, and those are very key. I think of those are very key links to physical health, and when we do that, when we're ready to do the work, and when we ask for support, that's when it's given. It's not sort of we say, sit back and say it's done for us. It's never just done for us, but we have to be willing to put in our bit.
It's difficult because people are not necessarily motivated to do the work, and they're not humble enough necessarily to look at the emotional component of their disease and how that really plays a role.
Right.
So getting past that barrier and somebody really understanding that is probably really huge for when you see a lot of your clients, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is. And the people who come to see me are also sort of mind, body, spirit. I mean, I don't do CBT and those kinds of things. So they're very open. So, and there've been numerous.
What are some of the common ailments or conditions or situations? What is the most common type of profile of the clients you're working with?
Well, I've had many women come to me, and men come to me for trauma. So I use a modality called EMDR, which is a psychotherapeutic modality, and that's been really powerful for them. I've also had women come for anxiety or depression, or struggles with their families, and also just personal growth. People just come for personal growth. It's never just something's wrong, but it's like, I really want to grow. I know there's a better life for me. So now my work has sort of shifted a little bit more into that, but it doesn't mean that there isn't healing, because I think of transformation as always a healing component as we grow. So, but those just in the psychotherapy, that's been what they've come for. And people have come with physical illnesses as well, and wanting to know what is the underlying cause. So in that, there comes saying they're the people who are ready to look at the emotional cause. And so then we can really dive really deep and uncover and heal those root causes. And invariably, there's a change, there's a shift, because it's all connected. It's all connected. And you're right that it is hard. It takes a lot of courage and a commitment. It's much easier to say, "Oh, I wish I could just take a pill, or an herb, or even exercise, But that emotional work is harder. It is much harder, but it's so powerful. And once I started adding sound, then it became a very supportive experience as well, where it was like sound just sort of, it's like a wind. It would move things through faster. They didn't have to work as hard. And so I found that to be extremely beneficial.
How has your work been received by some traditional allopathic doctors or just Western physicians? I'm just curious, because with us, with stem cells, I mean, it's a mixed bag. There are some physicians who are a little bit more progressive, more enlightened, and they're willing to give it a second look. A lot of them just sort of turn up their noses and say, "Oh, where's the data? Where are the clinical trials? This is all just a placebo." In your experience, like with psychiatrists or clinical therapists, what is the general feedback you're getting from that community for your practice?
Well, I don't think we'll quite understand it. I mean, I have worked occasionally from now and then with psychiatrists with some of my clients. But in all honesty, I don't share when I know that somebody's not open. That's not the point. Those are not the people I'm trying to reach. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just here for the people who are open and ready to receive what I do. So I'm here to educate if somebody's open. But if they're not, it's just a waste of time and energy.
So what would you say if you could talk to your 22-year-old self today?
Don't get on that plane.
Missed that flight. Yeah.
Don't get on that plane.
I think I would tell her, specifically about that experience, I would tell her that her sexuality is one of the most beautiful things about her, and that she owns her sexuality, and no one else has a right to tell her what to do with her body, who she's with, or her life. That that she has the right to choose herself, and nobody else needs to get in the way or should get in the way. And if they do, to just walk away, run. And that feeling shame doesn't mean that she's shameful.
Big difference.
Big difference. Feeling guilt doesn't mean she's guilty, because there's so much of cultural, you feel guilt, and I didn't have that differentiation then. So those two things I would say. And once being taken back, I would just say, trust what you know and love, and don't listen to the others.
Trust your intuition.
Trust and don't listen to what others try to tell you, because your way is your own way, and only you can live your life. Nobody else even knows what your life should be like, or or you are the liver of your own life. And so don't listen to others' voices or dogmas, and speak up.
One of your really powerful statements or advice is that you talked about how important it is to choose yourself. Can you talk a little bit about how you've applied that to your life, sort of, and your evolution with that phrase? Because obviously this isn't something that you've necessarily adhered to all your life, and a lot of that is owed to the patriarchy and subservience that you talked about. But can you talk about how you've applied that choose yourself philosophy to your life, and also maybe how listeners can apply this perspective to their own life?
Sure. So I grew up with parents who were very, very strict, and my mother's a narcissist. So what that means is that everything was about her. And so I grew up thinking love was pleasing her and taking care of her and giving her what she needed, but nobody was really taking care of what I needed emotionally. School and food and all of that, yes, but on a deeper level, that wasn't there. So I didn't know how to choose myself. I sort of grew up as a people pleaser and a caretaker. That, to me, I defined that as love. And so when I did get married at 24 to an Indian man, that's the pattern I fell into. I thought love meant, his ambitions were more important than mine, and 3 meals a day on the table. And it was sort of this formula I sort of
living a
slipped
template
into.
according to a template, basically. Yeah.
Right. But when I left the marriage, when I started questioning, because I wasn't unhappy. And I would say to listeners, if you're not happy, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like something's not quite right, or you feel on some deep level, there's got to be more to life than what I'm living now, then begin to question everything. Question what you've been told, question the beliefs you've been grown up with, question who's been telling you what to do or what not to do, what you should do, and what you're supposed to do. Question all the formula that you've been given about what your life is to be like. And take some time to really sit with yourself and ask yourself, what's important to me? What does my heart want? What does my body want? What makes me happy? What makes me excited? What makes me feel alive? And what did I remember I loved to do as a child? And to get in touch with that joy, that freedom, it might be a very different path of life than where you are. And life does that. It kind of takes us on detours or down wrong turns. But
Sure.
it's just a detour. You can always get back. But but the answers are always within. So if somebody who's listening is a people pleaser or a caretaker, choose yourself and start with small things. It might be just giving yourself 15 minutes or half an hour a day to do something you love, like maybe it's to paint or hike where you want to go, or do something just for you. And once you start giving to yourself as opposed to giving to others, that's food for yourself. It's nourishment for yourself. And when you nourish yourself, you're nourishing your body, you're nourishing your soul, you nourish your spirit. And that's when you get happy. And when you follow that, just keep following that, adding to that, and start surrounding yourself with people who want you to be happy, who want you to succeed, who want you to have the best life that you want for yourself, not what they think you should have. It's choosing us, especially I think women from South Asian cultures. It's like we're sort of indoctrinated with, you're supposed to give your life for some other cause, but no, we or mothers, or there's so many ways we don't choose ourselves, or we betray ourselves. Maybe it's a work we don't want to do, but we think we're supposed to do, right?
I mean, I was just going to say relationships are such a vital piece of this because, in my experience personally, I could be on all the right medication. I could have the best cognitive therapist, but if I come home and I'm continuing to subject myself to those toxic messages, and I'm continuing to adhere to that false narrative that my worth is defined by what is on my business card, or my worth is defined by how many trophies my kids racked up, then all the medication and all the therapy in the world is going to be for naught. There's really no value. And I think there's no, if we were to look at a pie chart in terms of like which piece of the pie is most important, I don't have a magic formula, but I would say they're all part of that same success formula. They all have to be in place. It's just, and you can't have one without the other. So, I mean, I'm really glad that you've been able to find that, find peace and healing in the relationships that you've cultivated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And, you have so much wisdom, and I think it's just so enlightening to hear you talk. And there's just so much resonance and alignment there with what we're all talking about. But I wanted to understand what has been helpful for you in terms of teachers that you've found a lot of value in terms of their, in terms of their messages, in terms of what wisdom they're imparting. Maybe if you could share some books or insights that you've gleaned from some of the teachers and authors and other wise folk.
Well, I remember when I was in graduate school, when I was, studying to become a therapist, and I was really torn up inside because I had spent so many years sort of thinking my body and sexuality were bad after being taken back to India. And I remember reading Sri Aurobindo, and his was the first spiritual book that talked about Tantra, because I had always heard Tantra is bad, don't even, read it. And so it was just this
taboo.
It was just, and opening up to anything that sort of affirms your body positive, sexual positive, I think, because a woman's power comes from her sexuality, from her womb. And affirming that is so important to us. So that was those readings I remember is really valuable. Of course, most of my psychotherapy readings were just great, I just drank them, and I soaked them up. There's one book in particular, Drama of the Gifted Child, that I loved, which really helped me see that how much parents put on children, and how much the child is not seen, but is sort of forced, whether it's overtly or covertly, in subtle ways, to become who the parent wants the child to become. I think it's Alice Miller.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but Drama of the Gifted Child is the title. There's another book, Finding the True Self, which is another book, like Finding Who You Truly Are, which is a really good book.
Tell us about your book.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I want to add a title to this called Brown Skin Girl that you might be familiar with. So
Gosh,
maybe you could tell us a little bit about that one.
well, that's my memoir. So it's my
Okay.
journey in black and white of from childhood to where I am today, and it's a journey of trauma, yet it's a journey of triumph, of healing, um, and it's a journey of an Indian woman and what I experienced as an Indian woman. The goodness of education and that privilege of that, but also the extreme shaming and treatment of that. And I think what you talked about of breaking free from patriarchy, from family,
Hmm.
choosing myself. And I think that is our power when we choose ourselves outside the conditioning, when we really listen to ourselves uniquely, because we're completely unique. Sometimes I think education sometimes can make us like, be very formulaic, but
Hmm.
following who we are is so choosing myself and my path to healing and finding love again. Um, yeah. So, and I think I see it now on our on the banner you have. Like I thought of myself as a broken woman. I just really didn't think of myself as that way, but I think it was, you know, reclaiming, and I don't mean external beauty, but like feeling beautiful on the inside. Um, that is something every woman deserves to feel. I think I just want to say to people that, the divisions that we're often given of culture, of religion, of gender, of politics, th- they're just man made divisions because essentially we're all human beings. If we were to sit down with almost any person, perhaps, and just get to know them, there is
Hmm.
so much, we're all beautiful, and nothing and no one should keep you from knowing how beautiful you are, how powerful you are, how amazing you are. And there's always a way out, however dark a space may be, however challenging a space may be. There is hope, there is help. And especially in this time where there's so much available on the internet and people and possibilities, there is a way. And above all, within yourself and your spirit, um, that part of you knows how to find its way out and through.
This has just been an incredible experience talking to you, and you have just tremendous amount of wisdom. And I find your whole story, just such a beautiful, inspiring journey that I hope people read your book and can learn from you as you have evolved and grown into this incredible person who was always there, even in her 22-year-old self, but just didn't come out quite yet. So I really hope people open their eyes and ears to what you're doing, and we really appreciate everything that you're doing for society today and how you're making such a difference in people's lives.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's beautiful to hear here. And I thank you both so much for having me. And I just love what you're doing and the change that you're creating and all that you're giving people. So it's been a delight to speak with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. So I have put up here on the screen, these are the two websites that people, if they're interested, they can find out more information about you and the services you provide. Is that the best way for people to engage with you, or is there any other,
Yeah.
are you on different social media channels, or is this probably the best way to
They
connect
can,
with you?
either way, my websites and there's social media information on the website. So either way, they can reach out to me. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. And
Yeah.
you are in Portland, Oregon. So not right
Yes.
now. You're in
Right.
Hawaii, and we're all
Yes.
very jealous. But yeah, during the most of the year, you are in Portland. So
Portland. Mm-hmm.
perfect. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Mytrae. It was so wonderful talking to you, and I'm sure our listeners, this will really resonate with so many of our audience. So we're really so grateful to you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, Shelly.
Yeah.